Hello, my fellow minor league nerds, and welcome to episode 4 of my Throwback Thursday Cap of the Day series. This week's episode is about another very short-lived team. This week, it's the Winnipeg Whips. The team was founded in 1886 as the Buffalo Bisons and played uninterrupted until June 1970. From 1924 to 1960, they played at Offerman Stadium, a cozy home run-friendly park that would be condemned after the 1960 season and demolished in 1961. This forced them to move to Civic Stadium, a WPA project that was being used as a racetrack at the time. It was renovated, seeing the racetrack removed, so it could accommodate both baseball and football. It was then renamed War Memorial Stadium. War Memorial was never suited for baseball and was not well maintained. Fans referred to it as the Rock Pile. The Bisons had led the International League in attendance from 1958 to 1960, but once they were forced out of Offerman, they struggled to draw fans. They would play in Niagara Falls at Hyde Park Stadium for 2.5 years in the late 60s just to get out of War Memorial, but that was only seen as a temporary fix. Besides the deteriorating conditions of War Memorial, safety was also a concern. During the second game of a doubleheader on July 18, 1969, the Bison's clubhouse was looted, and the team's 16-year-old clubhouse boy was held up at knife point by a group of teens when he walked in on them. This led to players demanding that games no longer be held there. Fights in the stands were also an issue. During that same night, several fights broke out in which broken beer bottles were used as weapons. The team had been looking for a new place to play, but nothing panned out. In June 1970, it appeared they would be moving to All High Stadium, a high school complex that did not have lights. In order to do so, they would have had to have paid for the field to be converted to a baseball diamond and back to a football field before the start of the high school season. They attempted the same move in 1969, but were rejected by the Board of Education. It turned out to be a moot point as the team, which had been community-owned since 1955, went bankrupt and was considered forfeited to the International League on June 4, 1970. Their parent club, the Montreal Expos, were interested in buying the club and moving them to Winnipeg, where they had attempted to place an American Association team in 1969, but were rejected by the league. The Expos' principal owner at the time, Charles Bronfman, was from Winnipeg. He was willing to build a new ballpark in the city and indicated that his goal was to have the Expos' entire farm system located in Canada. There was an attempt by the city of Charleston, West Virginia to land the team, but that city was ruled out. Unknowingly, the Bisons played their final game in Buffalo on May 27th, a 6-5 win over Rochester in front of only 150 fans. The Expos were able to purchase the franchise without having to go through bankruptcy. The International League chose to leave the team's debts in Buffalo, and it would be wiped clean after 2 years unless another team chose to arrive before then. But baseball wouldn't return to the Queen City until the Eastern League transferred the Jersey City A's from Buffalo in 1979 to become a new incarnation of the Buffalo Bisons. Today, that team is known as the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. With the Expos able to purchase the franchise, they were cleared to move them to Winnipeg, renaming them the Whips. They would play at Winnipeg Stadium, which would later be renamed Canad Inn Stadium, and would be torn down in 2013. At the time, all International League teams played in the eastern portion of the United States. The closest team to Winnipeg was the Toledo Mudhens, who were over 1,100 miles away. As part of the approval to move the team to Winnipeg, the Expos had to agree to pick up the additional travel costs of every opposing team, which could cost up to $50,000 just for the rest of the season. Their hope was that the team could move over to the American Association, which was a much better geographical fit for the 1971 season. Their first game in Winnipeg was played on June 19, 1970, in front of an overcapacity crowd. Going into the seventh inning, the Whips were down 2-0 to defending International League champions, the Syracuse Chiefs. The Whips' seventh began with Angel Hermosa getting a single. He was then moved over to second when Boots Day reached first on an error. The next batter, Rich Smith, was then walked. Up came third baseman Kevin Collins with the bases loaded. He was 0 for 3 in the game. This at-bat, though, would bring all 7,021 fans to their feet as he would hit his first ever grand slam. Winnipeg would go on to win the game 4-2. The excitement did not last long, though. The team was not very good. They went 43-59 in Winnipeg, finishing in 7th place with an overall record of 52-88. The 1971 season started off promising when they won 2 of their first 3 games over the Tidewater Tides. But the season went downhill from there. They actually finished worse than they did in 1970, going 44-96, finishing 42 games out of first place and 16 games behind the 7th place Toledo Mudhens. They would only win 17 of their last 74 games. There was some excitement on May 14th when they hit 9 home runs, a modern-day AAA record, but still managed to lose the game. They were down 11-1 to the Syracuse Chiefs at one point, but used the long ball to take a 12-11 lead with 2 outs in the 9th. Syracuse hit a homer of their own to tie it up at 12. The Chiefs then took the lead in the 10th, only to see Dave McDonald of the Whips hit his second home run of the night, keeping Winnipeg alive. The game ended in the 12th when Syracuse took a 15-12 lead and managed to hold on, even with Winnipeg bringing the tying run up to the plate in their half of the 12th. That game was played in front of only 697 fans. Like in Buffalo, the Whips struggled to draw fans. Not being able to fill the park and having to pay the travel costs for 7 other teams to come up to Winnipeg, this caused the Whips to lose money in both seasons. The hope was still to move the team over to the American Association, but it wasn't to be, as they were unable to convince the association to swap the team in. Travel costs to and from Winnipeg for the other teams is what led to the rejection of the idea. On November 22, 1971, it was announced that the team would move to Hampton, Virginia, just 19 miles from the Tidewater Tides, where they would play for 2 seasons as the Peninsula Whips. They would then move to Memphis and play as the Memphis Blues for 3 seasons. After that, they would move to Charleston to play as the Charlies for 7, and then it was up to Maine to play as the Maine Guides for 5 seasons, before settling into Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, where they became the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre Red Barons in 1989. Today, they're known as the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre Rail Riders. The 2 biggest future MLB players to play in Winnipeg were Steve Rogers and Mike Torres. So the 2 hats I have in my collection aren't actually authentic to what the Whips wore, as they're both Hat Heaven reproductions, but I do think they're both pretty awesome. Well, my nerds, that's it for this week's episode. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to receive notification every time I upload a video, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, stay safe, and I will see you then.